A lot of people think election fraud happens at the polls, and sometimes that does happen, but so much more of it is happening behind the scenes, and it's months in advance, and it's when people are trying to even gain ballot access. And that is what I experienced with my opponent. She did obtain fraudulent signatures to get on the ballot, so a lot of this video will be shedding light on how I figured it out, how I took her to court, and the judge's ruling to ultimately kick her off the ballot. Now, if you're new here, my name is Katie Aiello. I represent the 1st Ward on my city council. Now, one of the reasons I'm making this video is because this has been one of the ugliest elections I've ever seen, and trust me when I say some examples, I'll just give you a little snippet. I would think things like children are off limits. Now, some of these people. And those are some of the components that I haven't shared with the rest of the world yet. While I felt convicted to take my opponent to court, I have been hesitant to talk about it since, and that is very unlike me. My former opponent, Marilla Pekmez, and her fiance, Russell Pelly, have been harassing me nonstop this year. They will constantly tell you it's the other way around. I was hoping to get through to the primary season and then be able to just take a break, and maybe they would go away. Unfortunately, the opposite has happened, and they seem to have only ramped up more, which is fascinating. So while I'm learning that there seems to be nothing that I can do to diffuse the situation, I might as well share with people along the way. The goal is to make better citizens, more mindful, more educated on these topics, and trying to demystify our government. And a lot of what I'm about to explain today, I'm also deeply concerned about because the response from people in my community has not been comforting. So it either leads me to believe that they are unaware of what actually happened, or they are as corrupt as my opponents seem to be. Let's get into it. Here is how I kicked my opponent off the ballot for election fraud, and, well, you can too. So for those of you new to the process, if you want to run for office, you're not just on the ballot magically on election day. No, that happens months in advance. In New York State, it happens at the end of February. It is freezing, it is dark and rainy and cold and snowy, all those things. But we are out there collecting signatures because the requirement is if you want ballot access for a certain party line, you need 5% of registered voters from that district to sign for you. So you will get an actual petition. At the top it says candidate's name, the public office that they are running for, their residence. Below you will then see the date, you'll see the signature, and then you will see the residence of the voter. Now the thing about petitions is you need to fill this out perfectly, which isn't hard. But at the bottom here, it's a very specific part. It's statement of witness. So if I was filling this out, I would say, I, Katie Aiello, state I am duly qualified voter of the state of New York and am an enrolled voter of, for me, it's the Democratic Party. Each of the individuals whose names are subscribed to this petition sheet subscribed the same in my presence on the dates above, indicated and identified himself or herself to be the individual who signed this sheet. There is pretty much one golden rule, and that is the person who signed had to be the person that signed. Consent doesn't count. If they signed for you in past years and you saw what that signature once looked like, that doesn't count. Now, you would think that would be straightforward, but apparently it's not. So that's what we're going to go over today. Anybody else, don't be afraid of this process. It is easy. Well, it is simple. It is a lot of work, though, and that's why I think a lot of people we find do try to cut corners, and that is alarming. In the 1st Ward, if you're a Democrat, 5% of the registered voters was 92. Now, the game is you want to collect more than that because, well, there's reasons that people could be invalidated. The signature might be illegible. They might have switched their party and it wasn't updated. Other caveat I want to make about this is when there is a primary for the same ballot line, whoever gets the signature first wins it. The other thing is if 2 candidates get the signature on the same day, they are both thrown out. So you want to get more than the baseline just to have room in case anything happens. But it comes down to when you hand in your petitions to Board of Elections, there is a period of window where for 3 days, anybody can submit general objections on your petitions. From that 3 days, there is now a 6-day window of when you will be expecting to hear about specific objections. Now, that is what I did. My opponent also tried the same. To put it in perspective, I had about 137 signatures. Only 2 of them were actually invalid. They weren't registered with the Democratic Party like I thought they were. I did have some others that were invalidated only due to my opponent had gotten to them first. By the way, anybody can submit objections on petitions. It doesn't just have to be an opponent. But in my case, when my opponent submitted objections on my petitions, that meant both commissioners, the Republican and the Democratic commissioner of Board of Elections, went through and they both had to agree if that challenge was deemed valid or invalid. If they agreed with the challenge, that meant invalidated the signature. So let's dive in and start talking about my opponent's petitions and what ultimately got her kicked off the ballot. Well, right from the start, she got 261 signatures, which is pretty extreme. In my district, it's a low voter turnout. We're lucky if 350, 400 people actually make it to the polls. But in the end, I found 90 of her signatures to be invalid. Actually, I challenged way more than that, but Board of Elections, both commissioners agreed at least 90 of these were going to be invalidated. That is huge. 35% is a red flag. So here is what it looks like when you go to Board of Elections and they fill it out. They go line by line for all your petitions and all the challenges, and they mark it if it's good or bad. A lot of it was because they weren't even registered in the party or even in the district. Like, not even close. There is also something I like to call sheet 25, which was a big red flag. Now, when it comes to Board of Elections, all that they can rule on is this a registered voter in the district at that address, and are they affiliated with that party? Anything else is not in their jurisdiction. They are not handwriting experts. They are not a law enforcement. If signatures were forged, that is for the courts to decide. I knew there were signatures that were deemed valid, but they were not the signatures of the person who signed. And you might be asking, how did you know that? Early on, when I got Morella's signatures, I was going through all of them, and I saw one of my constituents had signed for her, and he had already signed for me. Now, she got the signature, I think, earlier in the month. I got it towards the end of the month, and I was kind of bummed because that meant it would count for Morella and not myself. But I remember asking this man specifically, I'm like, hey, did you sign for anybody else? And he said no. So in my head, I'm thinking maybe he was just trying to be nice to me that day, and he felt bad that he actually signed for her or something, and I'm like, no big deal. But then I looked at the signatures closer, and Morella's signature for this man was nothing like the signature that I got for him. And I was just so confused. It just didn't make total sense, but because also of sheet 25, I had a lot of doubts in my mind. So I just messaged this man. I'm like, hey, no big deal if you already signed for my opponent. I just want to make sure everything's good and ask you, like, this is your signature, right? And he said no. I'm like, okay, which made sense. It wasn't his signature because it really did look nothing like it. But from there, we started pulling that thread, and was an enormous amount of issues. There was forged signatures for sure. Now, Morella wasn't the only one collecting signatures. Russ Pelly, her fiance, also did, who has ran for office himself before, so he knows how this process works. She had another man with her, Fred Berzace. Fred had also ran for office prior. He knows how this is done. You had Maria McNeil. She is a sitting county legislator. She used to be in the city council seat that I have now. She's helping Morella. This is Maria's, 8th time trying to do this. But also, she had the endorsement of the entire committee. You had Emily Raymond helping her. You had Don Buttonshawn. If you don't know these names, don't worry about it. But locally, let me tell you, when I say that these people had experience in collecting petitions, they knew what they were doing. At this point, I'm messaging back and forth with somebody to pick their brain because these signatures just aren't making sense. It does not look good. I don't know what to do, though. Again, I don't even have party support. There's nobody I trust. Oh, that's another thing. I have been hesitant to speak because of myself and trying to protect my family and how much harassment there has been throughout this process, but also I'm not sharing any names with anybody because the amount of harassment I've seen from Russ and Morella and the crew to people they think are in my corner, unacceptable. But when I was sending them screenshots of these petitions, he immediately calls me and pulls up the election law for a New York State Update 2023. And he goes, wait, can you find any signatures that look suspicious from Morella herself? Now, before we were talking about when signatures are invalidated, you need to get enough invalidated to kick them off the ballot. When it comes to fraud, if a candidate themselves are now involved with any election fraud, one signature is enough to remove them from the ballot. Candidates are held to a much higher standard. Don't believe me? Look at cases passed like Buttonshawn versus Salatino, which a lot of people in this area are quite familiar with. That was our assemblywoman. And I actually learned a lot from her petitions as well in that whole court case between Chris and Marianne. So thankfully he sent me this because then I called one of the best lawyers in New York State when it comes to election law. His name is Jeffrey Bocchicchio. He's out of Buffalo, New York. He actually represented Marianne Buttonshawn when she took her opponent to court years prior. He answered the phone right away, looked at all my petitions, and was like, I'm in. And not only was he all in taking this and representing me in court, he was also finding more discrepancies and issues than I had even looked at. Now, I will give you a couple tips and tricks of what I did. Not all of them, though. When I got Morella's petitions, I did what I do best, and I opened up Excel and I started a spreadsheet, and I put all the names, I put screenshots of all the signatures, requested all the signatures from Board of Elections, and I started then comparing that, and there were just red flag after red flag. And that's also mind-blowing of how much more issues there were, and we're going to get into the other details, but it is crucial to know they do file a cross petition on me for residency, saying that this isn't really my apartment, literally the one I'm in right now. But his advice was like, let's not even fight them on untimely, because judging by these people, they're going to come after you for as long as they can. So we can just squash this in court for you. Your life will be a lot easier. I'm like, you know what? You're right. So of course I have the spreadsheet. That's a super big help. Highly recommend it. But also this is kind of a unique twist. I don't know anybody who's really approached the subject this way before. When I was looking at Morella's signatures and I saw the subscribing witnesses of some of those names I said before, I knew that they were friends and supporting the candidate for mayor, Frank DeBrango, and they were also probably carrying signatures for him. I remember when Morella posted that she went out collecting signatures with Maria McNeil for county legislator. I'm like, okay. So I also requested those signatures. Now, this part is fascinating to me. While I'm going through signatures, I'm now comparing signatures, and names that are on all these petitions aren't even matching each other. Not only that, really looking at these, there was actually 3 instances where Morella's own petitions had the same person's name down multiple times on different sheets, and the names of that person didn't even match. Literally, there were 2 people who apparently signed twice for Morella, signed twice for Maria, and Maria had apparently gotten 3 of those pages, Russ had gotten 1. It was all very, very strange. But now there's 8 signatures. None of them match. None of them match. Well, technically 4 and 4, right? So this was wild. Like, they weren't even trying to hide it a little. I'm actually really stunned that these even got submitted. If anybody went out and collected signatures for me and I saw stuff like this, I'd be like, yeah, we're not going to submit that. But no. Now, before we start talking about court, where we're going to all wrap it up, this is going to look extreme. Possibly. But because I saw that Morella, Russ, Maria, they all went out collecting signatures together, I literally went into arts and crafts mode and I started organizing all the petitions in order and just comparing them. Because in most cases, they would go door to door together. But a lot of the petitions were kind of shuffled. And if you're going door to door together, you're probably just going to, all have the names in order. And every now and then, there were just names, random names that were on other people's petitions, but like just completely out of order and on somebody else's. And also, the signature looked nothing like it. I would literally highlight depending on who got what. And I'm going to have to get a screenshot of it, of a better time of it. But I would just put them in order, and I could actually understand and start to see where they went when. In certain cases, they claimed that they were at certain places, and, well, in court, we found out that was not true. Now, because it's election law, it has to move fast because there is a primary coming. So this was all kind of expedited. The very first day was preliminary. That was all just video call online. And then what followed were 3 days actually in court. So it is May 19th. 9 a.m. we were supposed to be there. We started about 9:30. By 9:40, Morella takes the stand to start testifying. Now, she was supposed to have her subscribing witnesses there. Everybody shows up except Russ Pelly. A spoiler alert, this becomes a pattern. So my lawyer starts to question Morella Peckmez. He just starts asking basic questions. What's your address? She says Brinkerhoff, which is on all her petitions. He says things like, do you sleep there every night? She says, yes, absolutely. He also said that she slept over her fiance's house one time in 8 months. Whatever. We know that Russ is on the Parkway. Presumably, we thought Morella was too, which is fine if she does live on the Parkway also, because you can have multiple residences. However, just for running for office, the Parkway isn't actually in the district, but where her parents live on Brinkerhoff area is in the district. Now, here's the thing. She actually registered to vote for the first time in Brinkerhoff address. This is in May 2022. So when we are going to court, she had not even been registered to vote for a year, and now she's running for office. But that's okay, remember, because she had all the support from people who have ran before. So then my lawyer actually, we pull out a DBA that Russ and Morella have together for the roofing company, and it claims that Morella's residence is Parkway, which she had filed maybe 9 days between actually registering to vote at the Brinkerhoff address. So we were just asking, hey, what about this one? And she said she does not live there, but that she was just told to put down that address. So right away, my lawyer was like, then you filed a forged instrument. And it was just not even 30 minutes into the day. And we established that that was happening. That was just a side thing. But like I said, you can have multiple residences for whatever purpose. So anyways, I just wanted it noted. By 10:20, Morella can't seem to remember all the stuff that they did. She got so many signatures. It was so hard to keep track of. So now we start getting into the very first signature I ever had an issue with. Like I said, that was the person that I contacted and said, hey, is this yours? 100% this man didn't sign for her. We know this. But now it's about to come down to, is she going to tell us the truth? So my lawyer, Jeff Okikia, goes, you swore under oath each of the individuals appeared before you, correct? She said, to the best of my knowledge, yes. That was their favorite line. Then she says, I don't ID. I tell them why we're here and they sign if they're willing to support me. And then my lawyer says, did these individuals appear before you? She goes, again, to the best of my knowledge, they identified themselves. We don't ask for driver's license. So then we get to sheet 22, line 7, which, by the way, this is all public information. Anybody can go to Board of Elections, see who is registered to vote where. You can never see who somebody voted for, but you can see when they voted. You can see where they're registered, all this stuff. My lawyer says, do you know this man? And she said, I personally don't know him. And then my lawyer goes, but you met him before. I remember so clearly. Morella points the petition, says, according to this, to the best of my knowledge. What? So this is already off to a rocky start, and we're only on the first signature. Oh, this is my favorite part. Okay, maybe not my favorite, but one of them. She goes, I met with 340 people. I don't know how many I collected myself. She and her entire team did not meet with 340 people. They met with 261. That also shows me so clearly how much of a farce this entire thing was. If you've ever collected signatures and you're out telling people that you got all your signatures in one day, no, you didn't. There is just no way. Unless we're talking back in the 70s when Rufy Elefante was around and there were actually like captains on each street and people really understood the petition process. But we aren't in those days anymore, unfortunately. You know what? Maybe we'll get back to it. But as of right now, you're not going to hit 340. That would be such an unbelievable lie. So now we're going to wrap up this first questioning section. So my lawyer says, when you circulated petitions, were they just your own? And she said, no, I was with Maria, which we know. So she's telling the truth there. Now, the very specific day that Maria and Morella claimed to have gone out together was March 3rd. And my lawyer says, did you circulate more than just that petition on March 3rd? Morella says, I don't remember. I was out for more than 8 hours a day collecting signatures. So here we are. Morella can't remember anything, it seems. She was so overwhelmed. And we're only 12 minutes into questioning about the very first signature. So then Morella starts getting teary-eyed and panicked, looks to the judge and says, I didn't know this was going to take this long. I need to go check on something with my family. Can I be excused? You don't get to do that. When you're on the stand testifying, who are you to ask a judge to take a break? It just blew my mind. Anyway, Judge McCluskey was very kind, very nice. He did allow a recess for 10 minutes. Everybody disperses and they come back. Miraculously, after this break, Morella seems to remember everything so clearly now. So when I'm explaining this person who had his signature forged, there were also 2 other names at this address. Both of them were his sisters. One was definitely the signer, but his other sister, it turned out to not be her signature. She also didn't even actually live there and wasn't registered to vote there. Morella doesn't know that we all already know this, but the reason we pursued questions is because we were just trying to figure out how these signatures appeared on the petitions. To be clear, Russ Pelly would never show up for court, so we don't even know the extent of how much fraudulent signatures there were, how many were forged. So that's also why Russ Pelly was held in contempt. He'll say that he wasn't. He very much was. There was a court order on it. Documented. There's records of it. Anyway, so you get the gist of how the morning went. Morella had been on the stand for about 2 hours getting questioned, and then we go to lunch. We come back. Oh my gosh, I almost forgot about this part. It was just wild to watch unfold. I just can't believe the audacity. Okay, let's start there. We reconvene from lunch. Morella's back on the stand. My lawyer goes up, asks Morella, very first question, did he speak to anybody on the break? Morella says to him, I called a bunch of people. My lawyer says, who'd you call? Morella goes, I called my mom, daughter, a few friends. This other guy says the name of one of the guys who signed that we know is probably one of the other 4 signatures package there. So my lawyer goes, why? Morella says he confirmed his parents signed. Like, wait, what? This is already weird. Because she had already said in court that the parents signed. So what do you mean you needed to confirm that the parents... Anyway, we said, did you call anybody else? And she said another person, one of the people else who signed for her, allegedly. And we're like, what did you say to him? And here's the thing. If you're new to this, you're not allowed to talk to people about what's going on while a court case is happening. Specifically, you're not allowed to talk with witnesses. That is known as witness tampering, which turns out would then become a theme throughout this entire trial. So here we are, and we're realizing Morella has been talking to all of these witnesses. And then finally, my lawyer just kind of stops her at the end of one of the questions, and he goes, pull out your records. Morella says, no, there's no reason for it. She tells him no. And then the judge, McCluskey's like, please pull out your call records, Miss Peckmez. So she goes to get her phone, and the whole time she's like swiping away on stuff, right? So now we're going through the whole call log. It was mentioned that she texted Maria. And then the rest of the day we had here testify, one of the subscribing witnesses, Fred Brazais, the one who got Morella's signatures, but also collected signatures for the mayoral candidate as well. And then we also had Maria, who collected signatures for herself and for Morella. The one thing I will add, when Maria's on the stand, we ask her about all sorts of stuff. We ask her about 649 to 655 Bleecker Street, which is a property that she claims to have gotten signatures at. And we ask if she's ever been there before, if she knows what it is, and she says no. I don't know if you all remember, but this is the very specific property that Russ Pelly was asking me for $100,000 of our district's ARPA funding for. Morella and Russ were both asking me for the ARPA funding for their building on Bleecker Street. This is the same period that Pelly brings me in an envelope of cash and thinks that's somehow acceptable, that when you are asking for funding from your representative to also give them an envelope of cash. No. Which, by the way, there is proof. These are the actual sticky notes from that weekend. I also have all the text messages of them asking me for money. So when I returned the money, I was trying to be polite, I suppose. I was just like, hey, Character Coffee, my business, is not accepting donations at this time. Also, if you're going to give a donation of that many hundreds of dollars, how are you going to not ask for a receipt? That's weird. Okay, so let's just get over pretending that it was ever a donation. 649, 655 Bleecker, I do want to say it's interesting that it comes up again because this is Pelly's property that he told me he needed all this funding for because previous tenants had ruined it and they needed to move people back in. But here we are, it's now 2023. From my understanding, renovations never happened to the place. It certainly appears like they haven't. But all of a sudden, we have quite a few people who are now registered to vote there. People who were once in other districts on James Street, right, now registered to vote all of a sudden in Morella's district and signing for her, which also Maria had claimed to get signatures from this very building, which that's not the only reason why it was interesting that she doesn't remember this building. The other interesting part is Maria was a real estate agent and had this building on the market for Russ and Morella. So it was just weird at first that she would say, no, she doesn't remember. Well, she didn't say she doesn't remember, but she wasn't familiar with it, right? So Maria tells us that the last time she was ever there was in the summer. But here we are. When you actually look at the petitions, it claims that she has a number of signatures from people at that property as recent as March 3rd. So basically, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It's very suspicious that not only are these signatures looking completely fake, Russ Pelly won't show to court. This is a building that they already tried getting city funding for, that they also tried bribing me for. They also have a sitting county legislator trying to help them, and now she's helping them run for office. But these people now all magically live in this building? I thought you said you needed money to renovate it. Which, by the way, when I went to subpoena these people and knocked on the door, nobody was there. And not only was nobody there, other local people told me, no, nobody lives in that building. This fraud goes so much deeper than just forged signatures. Now there's actually fraud in where people are registered to vote. So this is what's interesting to me. These are the same people who try to claim that my residency presents some aura of a sham. Now that is like the legal jargon of this, and that this isn't actually my place, that this isn't my name on the lease. But what is actually an aura of a sham is a building that you own, that all of a sudden magically all these people apparently live in it who you are collecting signatures from. You are getting absentee ballots ready to go and from, who are apparently voting now from this address in a district that they are not actually physically at. Day 2, we had multiple people come in to vouch for whether or not they signed for signatures. And mind you, we couldn't even get everybody in of what was needed. There were times that I would go to buildings to try to subpoena people to have them come to court. When I go to these properties, some of them don't even exist anymore. It's just an empty flat lot from some fire that happened months ago. But Maria, Morella, and Russ all claim to have gotten that signature of the person who lives there somehow. So these are kind of some of the barriers that kept us from getting everybody in. But what we did uncover was 6 people who did not sign that petition themselves, which the kicker is, not only did 6 people not sign, it completely contradicted the testimony of the witnesses the week prior. That's perjury. So then we get to day 2. Also, we're still trying to tie up the residency stuff for me just to make these people go away. My landlord also testified. He said, this is my lease. I had been renting since June 2021. One of the other things that I need to say, and we're going to wrap it up here soon, is we need to talk about the witness tampering again, because there were other people that were brought into court. We couldn't get to all of them on day 2 before lunch happened. This sucks for people, by the way. All the people who came in to testify, thank you so much. This one woman, she came in and she was pretty upset about the experience because she was hoping to get back to work, and we're on lunch at this point, and she's like, basically what we find out from this is Morella goes up to this woman who has to testify soon. It was like, hey, you signed for me, remember? That's all I can think of, is she was trying to do like this little spell over her, be like, hey, yes, which because she knows that she didn't, and she was trying to like trick her into saying yes or something. Also, witness tampering. One of the security officers in that room heard that happen, so she approached Morella and just gets clarity. Did you speak to this woman? And Morella is like, no, I didn't, and blows it off. I'm like, okay. So now, at another point in the process, there is another man that I know who, for a fact, his signature was forged. He was very upset about it. He wanted to go to the courthouse and have his name cleared. He was there to testify. He's from a nearby apartment complex. We couldn't get to him before the lunch break. When we go downstairs, we see Morella speaking with this man, reading everything off, and she is telling him, hey, court is going great. We actually don't need you to testify. You can go home. No, court was not going great, to be clear. Well, at least for her. So she wanted him to go home. She wanted him to not return because that would have been one more piece of evidence against them.
Me too. Katie, are you recording too? Typical, you have no class. Jeff, why are you intimidating witnesses? You are. You're literally intimidating a witness.
And also, this is one of the people that Russ collected a signature for. It was blatantly not his signature. Another juicy part that we can't actually reveal in court. So I find out ahead of time that this man's signature isn't his. Other ones on the sheet look suspicious, so I go a couple floors over. I knock on the door. I ask this woman, hey, is this your signature? And she says, yes, it is. I'm like, oh, good. Oh, I'm so glad. But then she literally says, yeah, the man who asked for my signature, he gave me money. I'm like, wait, what? She said, yeah, he said that I was the nicest person he met all day. Here you go. So meanwhile, yes, I was successful in kicking Morella off the ballot, but I'm still very concerned that these people and players are still out there without any repercussions. Now, I did hand all this information off to law enforcement. Pelly paying people who said these things. The forged signatures, some other people I have understandings of who probably signed it. The fake residences, the absentee ballots. Oh! Another part, this wasn't just on Maria's petitions and Morella's and the ones that Fred collected and Russ collected. It's also on the school board election petitions. This goes as deep as on Sue Arcuri. When Russ Pelly collected signatures for her, there were a multitude of the same forged signatures on those too. Where is anybody to stop this? To say, no, this is unacceptable. This isn't just unacceptable, it is illegal. I don't know, but I'm over it. And it's not just because they're my opponents. I'm just getting really concerned of these power structures in place. And it seems to be that, yeah, remember when I talked about the bribe and I reported it and nothing happened? And now remember when I talked about election fraud and reported it and nothing's happening? Really makes you wonder whose sides people are on and why, and what's being protected and why. And in the meantime, my residency is pursued and investigated when there is no criminal precedence on it. Literally one guy was prosecuted in all of these years, and that was an actual sham. Like, there was no running water or anything to the building. And just to lay it out for you, there was a man in Albany who, he slept at his property once in 7 years. It was a studio apartment his company, his law firm paid for. Slept there once in 7 years. The courts ruled that to be his residence. So he could vote and he could run for office and he could be elected there. Meanwhile, here I am, a single mother. I need support with my kids. I'm in multiple places, but Utica is also my residence, and it's also where I live. It's where I am right now. It's where I'm filming this video, and it's not just because for election purposes and to serve, but I literally own a business here that I have for 6 years. I employ people who also happen to live in the district. But because that's politically inconvenient for people, they're going to try and make it an illegal issue. And they will actually rope in the DA's office and law enforcement and other people and get media in on it, because I would dare speak up and serve the people for the term that I was voted in to represent them for. Now, all I took to court was Morella. That's the only part that the judge could rule to remove her from ballot access. The other people who we did expose for signatures on their petitions. They did not have attorney representation there. It's not something that they could be kicked off for, but it is still something that law enforcement can look into. I did hand this all off to the sheriff's department. I'm told that it was then handed to the county DA's office. I don't know where this stands. I'm told that the DA's office doesn't like to get involved in political measures. I don't know how true that is. I've experienced something a little bit opposite of that. Again, I'm making this video. I have concerns. All I know is that anytime I've interacted with these people, retaliation is all that comes next. And here's another big issue I have is not only did Morella say that her rights were violated, she then goes on to say that this was all done on a technicality based off one signature. No, the judge made it clear that all it takes is one signature. So no, it wasn't just one signature. There were many more than one that I exposed, and there's many more that we couldn't even get to because Russ Pelly would never even come to court. He hid. This is a problem, and if the deception and the lie to even gain ballot access starts there, how far does it go when these people are actually in power? So let me leave on this in the words of my lawyer, Jeffrey Bocchicchio, who has done so many of these exact election law cases. He said he has never seen so much fraud on so few petitions, not just by Morella, but by multiple people. And like I said, this doesn't even scratch the surface of everything I've been through this election season, and that's not why I'm making this video. I just feel deeply that this is information people need to know, because if it can happen here, it can happen anywhere. And if it's happening by people and elected officials who have already been in office for many years, and when I bring it up, they're not even fazed, that they continue to lie about it, makes you really wonder, how long has it been happening? How long have people been illegally obtaining ballot access? Not okay. Not okay. Thank you for listening. And hopefully this doesn't dissuade other people from getting involved in politics, because again, we need more people involved. The more good, honest people who care, who you're sitting there and you're like, oh, I would never do that. That means like we literally need somebody like you actually in and to run. If you need help, let me know. I'd be happy to assist anybody in figuring out petitions and getting more involved and getting on these party committees. We need people all hands on deck. Otherwise, if we're not paying attention, there are people, unfortunately, who will try to take advantage of the system and try to undermine the democratic process any way they can for their personal gain. We can't let that happen. Thank you to everybody along the way. This was not just all me by any measure. I had a lot of really amazing support. But there are many people who, if you have stood by my opponents and condoned this conduct, not just even forging the signatures, but just the vile things that they have said about me and my family, and the lies that they continue to spread, and the torment that they continue to try to pursue, and you stand there next to them, continue to smile, we're not going to be on the same page. I'll just leave it at that. You're somebody whose discernment I won't trust. I won't trust your leadership, and I will want you far away from office. So I will continue to make posts and to continue to spread the word, because people like that, people who try to buy their way in, people who try to steal their way in and forge their way in, have no place in office. There are Republicans actively supporting and condoning, trying to make sure that Russ and Morella have access to office, and I don't know why, and I'm concerned about it. So for those of you who have watched this, who wanted to stay informed, who wanted to better yourselves in the community, thank you, thank you, thank you. I am grateful for all of you who listen. It's what really keeps me going. The more people we can get involved in local politics and local government, over national, where we have very little say, if much of any, the better our communities will be as a result. The rest of it, like I said, I made some predictions. We'll see how it goes. But judging by what they've done when I said even nothing, I can only imagine. As always, this has just been my experience. I bring receipts. If you hear anybody else say anything else, ask for receipts.